life's just plodding along and then something comes out of left field.
Life gets messy.
And just throws you right off the track you're on.
Yeah.
We hear these stories all the time. And I think we've all probably experienced it ourselves as well. A big whammy comes along.
Aren't they fun?
They're joyous,
Yeah.
And while you're on the floor feeling the effects of that, it can really feel like it's not going to get better, or where do I go, or who do I turn to? Almost the dark night of the soul.
Yeah, that's
comes
exactly
over
right.
What do I do? When's this going to end? It's just this mishmash of all sorts of emotions, isn't it?
And it's really interesting when you come out the other side, you can get some perspective and kind of see how you move through that process a bit, you know. But when you're in the thick of it, and I remember being in the thick of something like this myself and just thinking, you know, I actually felt as though I'd really lost myself.
Yeah.
And which was bad enough, let alone the added thought was, I don't know whether I'm going to be that same person again. And I've certainly heard clients talk about that when they've been in the thick of significant and particularly, I think, unexpected life events, and that can come in so many different
Yeah, when you're not in control
shapes.
of it, it's very different, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, whether it's a death, whether it's the loss of ending of a relationship, whether it's redundancy, those things that are completely unexpected and life-changing can bring you to your knees. And I think a lot of people don't know what to do in those instances.
Yeah.
And I guess my experience is it's such a I know it's so cliched, but it's such a one day at a time.
Yeah.
And I remember myself handing over almost like my faith and saying, somebody else has to tell me that everything will be okay because I'm really not sure it's going to be or I'm going to be. And I think having lots of support, or maybe not lots of support, but the right support. You know, you can have good support from a few people, or you can have lots of support from lots of people. But either way, you really need people in your corner, and I think you also need to pull your life back down to basics.
Simple.
Yeah, and I really agree with that, because I've, in my recent years, have gone through a lot of the death in the family, so and a lot in the last few years. And I've found that death's, I was going to say it's a funny one, but it's not funny at all. But it's a funny one in that other people find death uncomfortable. So sometimes in those situations, the support you thought you had will disappear. So it's like sometimes you just have to go back to your total raw self, and it is just take one day at a time, because sometimes those people that you would call on, they don't know how to handle it either.
That's right.
So you actually have to go within to kind of process that, and that's very different for lots of different people, and there's no textbook written on that either. So I've found that taking that space and just coming back down to total basics is one of the best things you have to do. Simplifying life
gets really simple, doesn't it?
It is, and
back
it's
to
amazing.
templates.
Exactly. And it's amazing how we overcomplicate life, don't we? But when big things like that happen, it's almost like this natural stripping away of all those non-necessities. They just disappear, and all those things become, they don't matter anymore. And you know, you might end up just you alone, or you with your core unit. I just remember just being with my children and nothing else mattered. All those things that I used to cling on to doesn't matter anymore. And back to basics.
Back to the basics, back to the templates, simple life templates. Because I do think adversity, grief, shock, when life gets really messy really quickly, it has a way of unanchoring you, so you're just not anchored. And it's like charting that sort of navigating those uncharted waters. And so to bring things back to a template, like a reference point of who you are, and like you were saying, the basics.
Exactly, because then slowly, because you will emerge from it, but you have to do that work, either just the inner work yourself, or whether you reach out to a key support person or see a psychologist, because that's always good, because that person's not attached to you, because a lot of people find a lot of these things quite uncomfortable, or even seeing you in distress, you know, whether it's you're going through a separation or redundancy. A lot of people don't know what to say, or they sometimes are almost building you up when you shouldn't be, you know, like really just not saying the right thing. They just want to support you 100% and not always are saying the right thing. So, you know, reaching out when you're ready to the right people is more than helpful. Yeah.
I think as well, it often touches them personally too. They've got their own, you know, if you're talking about relationships ending, deaths, you know, your immediate family, it might be someone in the immediate family that has left, died, or whatever. And so your system, your core unit, as you said, are also affected. And so that's why, you know, going outside of that can be really useful, whether that's just one step removed and you're going to friends who are less affected and or a professional. I think there's definitely things to keep in mind. But I know, again, I've talked about this before, how I find I have a lot of conversations with people when they're in that transition stage of change, whether it's wanted or not, but particularly when it's not wanted, finding things that make you feel, you know, that anchor you, as you said, and that help you have a sense of capacity at least somewhere in your life. And I know that when I went through a tricky time at the beginning of last year, for me, a lot of people would say, how do you do your job? You know, how on earth can you possibly be going to work and supporting people through tricky times when you're going through such a tough time? And for me, it was an area where I had the most confidence and I was laser focused on them. I was very invested in not thinking about my own life during those work hours. And it actually gave me a sense of, I can do this life gig in the face of this awfulness. And because of that, it actually increased my strength, I think, and made me more resilient. Whereas if I had have taken some of the advice that people gave me, which was to take time away from work, I would have just been bouncing around my house and distressed and ruminating and like it would have. I mean, that's not to say for some people it's either really necessary because of what's happening for them, or it's necessary because of their job, the nature of their job, and how they might perform in that. But for me, that was a really important thing. It's such a part of my identity, being a psychologist and helping others, that to kind of relinquish that even for a short period of time was just completely unpalatable, and it wouldn't have been helpful for me. And I knew, hopefully no client says otherwise, and in fact I've had feedback, you know, to reassure me that I was still very capable and competent and effective during that period of time. And then just the other basics, I mean, my sleep was shot. So, you know, I tried to do all the tricks that we know, and over time they worked. It certainly wasn't a quick fix. My appetite went, which, dare I say, it was fabulous for a weight loss process. No, I shouldn't be recommending that and admitting that, but it was. But again, I would try and start getting some of those basic things happening. Exercise was pivotal, and I mean, I don't actually love exercise. I'm not that person. I've always done it because it's good for me. And in this instance, it was really, really good for me. And I know I'm saying such basic things, but that's what I needed to bring work back to. Being with my kids, working, trying to get on top of my sleep, eating well, exercising, and spending time with people who were in my corner. And who would support me, and who I could be whatever version of myself I needed to be that day. You know, the people who would help me buy into pretending everything was okay, and the people who would buy in, you know, who would let me bawl my eyes out.
But it's finding your joy, isn't it? Because these adversity, these big life whammies, they cause a tremendous amount of pain. So that's what you're in. So you have to soothe it by finding your joy. Because if you don't, you're going to be soothing it with probably more unhelpful coping mechanisms that ends up putting you in a bit of a spiral.
I was going to talk about the whole thing of how to tolerate pain. you know, the distress, tolerating distress, and where the balance is in that. Because some people then go sort of that too tolerant, where they sort of go on autopilot and, you
it
know.
bites you in the bottom later.
Yeah. Or they're the opposite, so they're totally intolerant, and they're big and they're large, and the breadth and depth of emotion is just so enormous. But they don't have perhaps any skills or capacity to accept their big feelings or emotional states or expression.
I really see a lot of people who have who are just intolerant of any form of distress or emotional discomfort. And not that I'm saying I want to see people in enormous pain, and I certainly don't want to be seeing them suffering. But I think when we can be a bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable, it actually builds resilience. And then it's about, well, how, on the flip side, as you said, when is it too much, and when do I need more support or more strategies, more intervention?
More understanding about what's happening to me.
It's just too much.
And
it's a really fine line.
What's happening to them. You know, to have someone say, okay, well, this is how your nervous system's going to respond, and that's a normal reaction, or this is your sleep at the moment, and it's going to take 3 to 6 months to, you know, and just even normalising those things in the context of their unique circumstance. Well,
there's so much research that actually shows the physical effects of, you know, losing a partner through death or separation, or, you know, you're at much greater risk of a heart attack in those, I think it's the first kind of month, 2 months after.
We need to slow down in those moments, because like, you know, some people will go into automatic and just busy themselves, but grief's it's interesting, because if you've got to deal with it, you've got to deal with the pain, you've got to feel the emotions that go with whatever's happened, because if you go into autopilot, it creeps up on you. It'll come back. It'll bite you on the butt. So you have to take that time. That's really
when the rug's been pulled out from under you in this really big way, it clearly has this impact on our the basics of life, our sleep, our appetite, our energy levels, our ability to concentrate and focus. All of those things are affected, and the downside is that the less sleep you get, and the more unwell you get, and that impacts your mental health. So if you're not taking those small kind of steps to try as best you can over time remedy and you know, and improve those things, sleep, diet, exercise, then you're going to stay in that cycle, and it's really just going to continue to perpetuate physical problems, mental health problems, physical problems, mental health problems.
And all the coping mechanisms we bring in, so it might be drinking too much or smoking too much, all that gets brought in, doesn't it? And then that, gets, it does, definitely.
I think that's the tricky thing. We all like to turn to our vices when we're struggling. Unfortunately, a lot of our vices aren't particularly helpful, but if we're also using them often.
And it's something that we see as a temporary fix can become very problematic and just join the equation of the pain that we're already in or that we're trying to mask.
When we have these experiences, you know, they do tend to touch other people's, you know, that we love, their lives as well. It's really challenging when our kids also have the rugs pulled out from under them. So when there is loss, you know, when you've lost a partner for however, whatever, as an example, or a parent or anything, then, you know, your children have lost their parent, their other parent, or their family life circumstances have changed, so there's a loss there, or they've lost their grandparent, you know. It's really, really tough to look after yourself and also be available to them, and yet that is our inclination. And I think we need to bring other people into their lives to help support us, to support them.
Exactly. Because I think it's our default, isn't it? It's our fight or flight response, isn't it? If anyone, you know, ourselves or anyone we love is going to be physically or psychologically harmed, especially if they're little, we're going to jump on them first and cushion them. But sometimes in doing that, we don't look after ourselves as well. So we don't look after the grief that needs to happen. But so that's why it's important to have that support
network.
the network around you, have the village around you, and if you don't, then seek it out.